The air in the dining room was thick enough to carve with a knife. It was Thanksgiving, 6 months ago, and the scent of roast turkey and almond stuffing couldn't mask the bitterness that clung to the stucco walls of our family ranch. I'm Clara, by the way. I'm 34. And at that moment, I felt every single one of those years. My sister, Brielle, sat across from me, a queen surveying her court. She was radiant, her designer dress shimmering under the chandelier, but her eyes held the cold glint of polished steel. My parents, Walter and Judith, flanked her, their smiles looking more like pained grimaces. And next to Brielle was her husband, Donovan, looking smug as he swirled a glass of expensive Cabernet. You know, Clara, Brielle began, her voice dripping with condescension, it's a shame you never did anything with that design degree. All this potential, wasted on, fixing leaky pipes. I took a slow sip of water, keeping my voice even. Someone has to keep the roots of this place alive, Brielle. Branches can't survive on their own. It was the wrong thing to say. Or maybe, it was exactly the right thing. Her face twisted into a mask of rage. She shot up from her chair, her movements sharp and violent. Before I could react, the deep red contents of her wine glass arced through the air, soaking the front of my white dress in a grotesque stain. The cold liquid shocked my skin. You have until sunrise to get out of my house, she shrieked, her voice cracking. A beat of stunned silence, then my mother, Judith, started clapping softly. Well done, sweetie, she cooed. My father chuckled, a dry, grating sound. About time someone put her in her place. They expected me to cry. To run. But the years of being their doormat had forged something harder inside me. I looked at the wine seeping into my dress, then back at their triumphant faces. A slow smile spread across my lips. I reached into my bag, my movements deliberate, and pulled out a single, tarnished brass key. I placed it on the oak table with a soft click. Then you have 60 seconds, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. And that's when their world began to fall apart. To understand that moment, you have to rewind 9 years. I was 25, fresh out of UC Fresno with a degree in interior design and a heart full of dreams. My canvas wasn't some chic city loft, it was this ranch, our sprawling almond grove, a legacy built by my grandmother, Genevieve. While other graduates chased corporate ladders, I wanted to restore the historic adobes of the Central Valley, to breathe life back into walls that had stories to tell. Grandma Genevieve was the one who understood. She was the matriarch, her hands gnarled from decades of tending the almond trees, her wisdom as deep as their roots. Roots are deeper than branches, Clara, she'd tell me, her voice raspy from the valley dust. Remember that. The branches reach for the sun, they show off their blossoms, but it's the roots that hold everything together in a storm. She was talking about my sister, of course. Brielle was always the blossom, the golden child. 3 years older, effortlessly charming, she was the one my parents paraded around. Her fashion boutique in Sacramento was their favorite topic of conversation. My sketches, my passion for preservation, that was just a cute hobby. While I spent my summers helping Grandma Genevieve with the failing irrigation system, learning the rhythms of the land, Brielle was off at marketing conferences, her life a whirlwind of cocktail parties and ambition. The financial bleed started subtly. It was a phone call a few months after I'd moved back to help care for a fading Genevieve. Clara, sweetie, I need a tiny favor, Brielle's voice chirped. Just a small loan. $3,000. To cover a shipment. The boutique is about to explode, I swear. I hesitated. $3,000 was nearly all of my savings. But then my mother got on the extension line. Don't be difficult, Clara. It's for your sister. Family helps family. The unspoken threat hung in the air, good daughters don't say no. So I wired the money. That night, something inside me shifted. The quiet resentment that had been simmering for years finally needed an outlet. I opened my laptop, the screen a stark white rectangle in my dark room. I created a new Excel file. I named it the Family Ledger. It felt dramatic, almost silly at the time. But as I typed in the first entry, a cold sense of clarity washed over me. Date, October 12, 2016. Item, loan to Brielle, boutique shipment. Amount, $3,000. Note, emotional pressure from mom. Unpaid. It wasn't just about the money. It was about documenting the truth. It was a secret history of my own sacrifice, a silent accounting of every time I was expected to be the root system for my family's glittering, selfish branches. I didn't know it then, but that simple spreadsheet would one day become my sword and my shield. The next 7 years were a blur of entries in the family ledger. The columns grew longer, the numbers larger. It became a catalog of my invisible life. $1,500, emergency repair for the main water pump. Dad said he'd get to it, $400 per month, increased water taxes for the Grove. Mom and Dad couldn't afford it, $5,000, another, last time, I promise, loan for Brielle after her first divorce. Each entry was a piece of my own dream deferred. The money I'd saved to start my own design business was funneled into keeping the ranch afloat, into funding Brielle's increasingly chaotic life. But the cost was more than just financial. It cost me a chance at my own happiness. His name was Alex. He was a landscape architect I met on a small restoration project in Hanford. He was kind, funny, and he saw me in a way my family never had. He saw the artist, not just the caretaker. For the first time in years, I felt like I could be more than just Clara, the reliable one. We'd been dating for 4 months, and things were getting serious. He was planning a weekend trip for us to Monterey for my 30th birthday. The night before we were supposed to leave, my phone blew up. It was Brielle, hysterical. Her new boyfriend, the one who would become her second husband, Donovan, had been arrested for a DUI. She needed me to drive to Sacramento, right now, to bail him out. I can't, Brielle, I pleaded, my voice low so I wouldn't wake Alex in the next room. I have plans. Big plans. Plans? She scoffed. What could possibly be more important than family, Clara? Mom and Dad are counting on you. I'm counting on you. I looked at Alex, sleeping peacefully, a travel guide for Monterey resting on the nightstand. I knew what I had to do. I scribbled a hasty, apologetic note, my heart feeling like a lead weight in my chest. When I got back 2 days later, exhausted and smelling of stale courthouse air, Alex was gone. His note was much shorter than mine. I can't compete with your family, Clara. I don't think anyone can. He was right. I felt like a ghost in my own life, haunting the hallways of a home that was supposed to be my sanctuary but had become my prison. The ranch wasn't a home anymore. It was a weight, and I was shackled to it. That was the year I stopped dreaming. I just focused on surviving, one spreadsheet entry at a time. The revelation didn't come with a lightning strike. It came with the scent of dust and decay on a sweltering August afternoon. I was in the old barn, a place that had been my grandmother's sanctuary, clearing out decades of accumulated junk. Sweat dripped down my back as I wrestled with a stack of old canvases. Tucked behind them, almost completely hidden, was a heavy, sea-worn wooden chest I hadn't seen in years. Curiosity piqued, I pried open the rusted latch. The air inside smelled of cedar and thyme. It was filled with Grandma Genevieve's things, old photos, gardening journals, a pressed wildflower. And beneath it all, a thick manila envelope sealed with wax. My name was written on the front in her elegant, familiar script, for Clara. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. Inside was a stack of legal documents. I unfolded the top one. My eyes scanned the legalese, the formal, intimidating text. And then I saw it. A grant deed. Dated a full year before Genevieve passed away. It was the deed to the entire ranch, the house, the barn, and every last one of the almond trees. And there, listed as the sole owner, was my name, Clara N. Miller. Tucked behind it was a handwritten letter. My dearest Clara, it began. If you are reading this, it means I am gone, and you have found what I hid for you. I am not blind, my child. I see how they rely on your strength. I see how your sister takes and your parents enable. This ranch is your heritage, your heart's work. It is not a cash machine for their whims. The roots must be protected. I've had the deed legally transferred to you. Mr. Alastair Finch has all the paperwork. Your parents know of this, I made them promise to tell you, but I fear their weakness will win out. This land is your anchor and your future. Don't let anyone make you feel like a guest in your own home. Protect the roots. All my love, Genevieve. I sank to the dusty floor, the papers clutched in my hand. My breath came in ragged gasps. Shock, then a wave of profound grief for my grandmother's love. And then, something else. A cold, hard anger began to crystallize in my veins. 7 years. For 7 years, they had let me pour my life, my money, and my heart into this place, all while knowing it was mine. It wasn't just a lie. It was the ultimate betrayal. We'll be right back with the rest of the story after this short break. If you're enjoying this, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let me know what city you're watching from in the comments below. Every comment helps this story reach more people. Thank you so much. Now let's get back to it. The next morning, my hands were steady as I dialed the number for Mr. Alastair Finch, my grandmother's old school, no-nonsense attorney. I explained who I was and what I'd found. There was a pause on the other end of the line, then a heavy sigh. Clara. I've been waiting for this call for a long time, he said, his voice laced with weary resignation. He confirmed everything. The deed was ironclad, registered with the county 9 years ago. And then came the gut punch. I spoke with your parents personally after your grandmother's funeral. I advised them to be transparent. Your mother cried, and your father assured me they would handle it as a family. They specifically asked me not to contact you directly. The betrayal was now absolute. It wasn't an oversight, it was a conspiracy. That afternoon, I set my first trap. I found my mother in the kitchen and casually mentioned the latest property tax bill. It's getting so expensive, I sighed. I don't know how you and Dad keep affording it. My phone was in my pocket, its voice recorder silently capturing the conversation. Oh, you know, she said with a breezy wave of her hand, we manage. It's our home, after all. We'd do anything to keep it. Her lie, so effortless and smooth, was all the proof I needed. That evening, I drove to the small cemetery where Grandma Genevieve was buried. The sun was setting, painting the Sierra Nevada foothills in hues of orange and purple. I sat on the cool grass by her headstone and spoke to her, my voice a raw whisper. I don't know if I can do this, Grandma, I confessed to the silent stone. This will break them. It'll break everything. I asked for a sign, anything to tell me I was doing the right thing. Just then, a great red-tailed hawk, which had been circling high above, let out a sharp cry and swooped low over the almond grove that bordered the cemetery. It felt like an answer. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about honoring her legacy. It was about protecting the roots. My resolve hardened like the dry valley soil. I would not let them sell her soul for a quick payday. My first call was to Maya. We'd been roommates at Fresno, a chaotic duo of art and law. While I was sketching building plans, she was dissecting torts. Now, she was one of the sharpest real estate lawyers in the city. We met at our old favorite coffee shop, the air thick with the smell of roasted beans. I laid everything out on the table, the deed, the letter, the family ledger which had now surpassed $40,000 in unrepaid funds and expenses. Maya listened intently, her expression shifting from sympathy to a cold, professional fury. They committed fraud, Clara. Deliberate, sustained, long-term fraud. She took a sip of her latte. So, what's the play? We can send a cease and desist tomorrow. No, I said, my voice firm. A letter is too easy. They need to understand the consequences. They need to feel it. Together, we scripted the entire confrontation. Maya would be on standby, ready for a video call. The plan was simple. I needed to bait them into exposing their own greed. The bait was easy. The tech boom in Silicon Valley was spilling over, with developers buying up farmland for a premium. A week later, I called Brielle. Hey, I said, keeping my tone light. Did you hear about the old Henderson place? Sold for a fortune to some tech company. Crazy, right? Our grove must be worth a mint. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head. You know, she said, her voice suddenly sharp with interest, Donovan was just talking about that. Maybe it's time for Mom and Dad to finally cash in. She took the bait hook, line, and sinker. Over the next few months, I played the part of the oblivious, helpful sister. I overheard phone calls between Brielle and Donovan, which I dutifully recorded. They weren't just planning to sell the ranch, they had already accepted a $20,000 illegal deposit from a developer. Their plan was to get our parents to sign, sell the property, and give me a small, finder's fee of a few $1,000s for my trouble. The audacity was breathtaking. The stage was set. All I needed was the perfect occasion to bring the curtain down. Thanksgiving was just around the corner. And so we returned to that Thanksgiving dinner. The turkey sat carved, the mashed potatoes steamed, and the tension was palpable. My smile was a mask, my calm a carefully constructed fortress. After Brielle's opening salvo about my wasted degree, Donovan chimed in, wiping his mouth with a linen napkin. She's right, you know. Sentimentality is expensive. This land is a goldmine. We've had a very generous offer, and frankly, it's time for Walter and Judith to retire comfortably. An offer? I asked, feigning surprise. Did you run this by me? Brielle let out a derisive laugh. Why on earth would we? It's Mom and Dad's house. You're just, here. You're a tenant who doesn't pay rent, Clara. That's all. That's when I delivered my line about the roots and branches. And that's when the wine flew. As the red liquid dripped from my chin onto the stained white dress, and my family applauded my public humiliation, I held their gaze. I didn't flinch. I placed the old brass key, the key to the barn where I'd found the truth, on the table. Then you have 60 seconds, I said. Brielle's face contorted in confusion and rage. What the hell are you talking about? I pulled my phone from my pocket, propped it against the gravy boat, and tapped the screen. Maya's face appeared, crisp and professional on the video call. Good evening, everyone, she said, her voice echoing slightly in the stunned silence. My name is Maya Singh. I am Clara's legal counsel. I feel it's my duty to inform you that this conversation is being recorded. Donovan sputtered, You can't record us. This is our house. Actually, it isn't, I said, pulling the manila envelope from my bag and sliding it onto the table. This is the grant deed for this property. It was transferred to me 9 years ago by its previous owner, Genevieve Miller. I am the sole, legal owner of this ranch. Maya's voice cut in again. The deed is legally incontestable under California law. Any attempt to sell this property constitutes felony fraud. Speaking of which, I swiped on my phone, and a new audio file began to play. It was the recording of my mother's voice from a few months prior. It's our house, after all. We'd do anything to keep it. My mother's face went white. My father looked like he was going to be sick. And Donovan, I said, turning to my brother-in-law, whose smug expression had melted into pure panic. About that generous offer. I wonder how that developer would feel knowing his $20,000 deposit was accepted by people who have no legal right to sell. That's wire fraud, I believe. The room erupted. Brielle lunged for the file, screaming that I was a liar, a thief. Donovan was shouting about suing me into oblivion. Through it all, my parents just sat there, silent and broken, the architects of their own destruction. Brielle grabbed Donovan's arm. "We're leaving," she hissed, her eyes burning with a hatred so pure it was terrifying. She dragged him and her screaming children out of the dining room, slamming the door so hard that a piece of plaster fell from the ceiling. In the ringing silence, the only sound was the soft hum of the refrigerator. The feast lay untouched. The trap had been sprung. The silence that followed their stormy exit was heavier than any argument. It was a silence filled with 9 years of deceit. I looked at my parents. They wouldn't meet my eyes. My mother, Judith, was silently weeping into her napkin. My father, Walter, was just staring at his plate, his knuckles white as he gripped his fork. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. My anger had burned away, leaving behind a cold, hard clarity. I calmly walked to the living room, retrieved my laptop, and connected it to the large television mounted on the wall. A moment later, the familiar grid of an Excel spreadsheet filled the screen. "I call this the family ledger," I said, my voice resonating in the quiet room. I started scrolling. Line after line appeared on the screen, a meticulous record of their neglect and my sacrifice. The dates, the amounts, the notes. The screen glowed with the raw data of my pain. $2,200, new septic pump, $1,800, emergency tree removal after the winter storm, $3,000, Brielle's credit card debt. The grand total at the bottom blinked in stark red, $42,750. "We didn't ask you to do that," my father finally mumbled, his voice thick. "You didn't have to," I replied, turning to face him. "You just had to complain that you were broke. You just had to let things fall apart, knowing I would be the one to fix it. You stood by and watched me sink my own life into a property you knew was mine, a fact you deliberately hid from me." My mother's sobs grew louder. "We were going to tell you, Clara. The time was never right." "The time wasn't right?" I echoed, my voice dangerously low. "But the time was right to sell it out from under me. To let your daughter and her con-man husband defraud a developer using my property as collateral." There was nothing left to say. I reached into my bag and pulled out 2 final envelopes. I placed one in front of my mother, and one in front of my father. "This is a formal notice of eviction," I said. "Under California law, you have 30 days to vacate the premises." Their heads snapped up, shock and disbelief warring on their faces. It was only then, as they stared at me like I was a stranger, that they finally understood. The doormat was gone. And I was finally home. The 6 months that followed were a painful, necessary amputation. The eviction was ugly. My parents tried to fight it, but the law was not on their side. The day they left, I watched from the porch as they loaded their lives into a U-Haul truck. There were no hugs, no tearful goodbyes. Just the hollow sound of a truck door sliding shut. Brielle and Donovan's world imploded spectacularly. The developer sued them for fraud. The IRS, alerted by the lawsuit, launched an audit into Donovan's shady business dealings. They declared bankruptcy, lost their house, and their marriage disintegrated under the pressure. The last I heard, Brielle was living in a cramped apartment, fighting for custody of her kids. As for me, I took them to small claims court. Armed with the family ledger, I sued my parents for the money I had spent on the ranch under false pretenses. The judge awarded me every single penny. The first thing I did after the legal battles were over was hang a new, hand-carved sign at the entrance to the driveway. It reads, Genevieve's Grove. I poured my energy, my heart, and my long-delayed dreams into the property. I launched my own business from the old barn, Valley Roots Design, specializing in restoring historic homes. My reputation grew, and for the first time, I was thriving, not just surviving. Sometimes, in the quiet evenings, I sit on the porch my grandmother loved, look out at the rows of almond trees, and feel a sense of peace that I thought was lost to me forever. The branches are heavy with blossoms, and the roots, my roots, are finally, unshakably secure. They've been trying to reach out, sending messages through old friends, asking for forgiveness. But after all this, am I wrong for wanting to keep the gate locked forever? Thank you for listening to my story. If you made it this far, please hit that like button, subscribe for more content, and let me know what you think in the comments below. I appreciate every single one of you.